Nicole Aloe was killed, cut up, and dumped in the Little Bear Creek in Scioto County, Ohio. Now, I've been talking a lot about the Scioto County Sheriff's Department. I don't know whether they're just grossly incompetent and completely unable to solve this murder, or whether they're covering for one of their friends or contacts. I don't know. Either way, what I do know is that Nicole's last days were absolute hell. Nicole went up to Portsmouth to meet Dylan Merring, who she had been chatting online with for months. She had chatted online with Dylan's mom. She had talked to both of them on the phone. She thought that it was going to turn out great, and it didn't. After just a few days, she contacted her grandmother, Diane Dill, and asked her to send her some money, which she did. She went to get that money at the Kroger store in Portsmouth. She picked it up. She's seen on surveillance video picking up the money and leaving the store. She's seen getting into an unknown car. Now, we have no idea how she wound up at Chris and Essie's house. We don't know if Chris and Essie took her out there, or maybe Essie's brother Richard Howard took her out there, or one of his friends. We don't know whether maybe Dylan took her out there. And we do have a theory that Steve Timberlake could have taken her out there. We just don't know. But we do know that she wound up out there because that's where she was killed. She was killed on a farm that's about 30 minutes outside of Portsmouth. We're thinking that she was probably taken out there at night. It would have been very disorienting. The road out of town is pretty straight, but once you get on the highway that goes up towards Otway, the road it's a highway, but it's very winding, hilly. There's lots of trees and underbrush on both sides. If someone was talking to her, if it was at night, she would really have had no direction, no idea of what direction she was going in, no idea of where she was. She would have no idea about the small towns that were up there. There are farms and houses along that highway, but it still would have been very confusing, very disorienting, especially at night. The road where you turn to go up to the farm is a narrow road, narrow country road. It is paved. It's barely wide enough for two vehicles to get down that road at the same time, passing each other. There are houses along this road, but it is very hilly. Again, there are thick trees, brush on each side with steep hills. It's a little bit at night like driving through a tunnel of trees. The driveway to get to the house is hidden. She probably would not be able to describe where she was. And she would know this, that she probably had no idea where she was. She probably knew that she had no idea how to explain where she was, how they got there, anything. So you get to the top of the driveway. You cannot see the house from the road. It's a very steep, twisting driveway with lots of vegetation on each side. So once you get on the driveway and drive about halfway down, it's about a quarter of a mile, you can no longer see the road, but you can see the house. And to get back to Chris and Essie. Chris and Essie were house sitting at this property. They do not own the property. The owner of the property took pity on them. She let them live there because she was leaving for a while, and she took pity on them because their roof was leaking and they needed to fix their roof. So she let them live in the house with the condition that they would have to move out when their roof was fixed. That was in May of 2009. They moved into the property. They immediately started making meth, doing all sorts of illegal activity, selling the pills that they were getting on their pill runs to Florida. There was a constant stream of drug addicts in and out of the house. At any given time, there were 10 to 20 people living in the house, doing drugs. Most of the people, but not all of the people living in the house, were on drugs, mostly meth. We know that the range of drugs, probably much more information than we have. We know for certain there was alcohol, of course, pot, Klonopins, oxy, and meth. And the breaches were very messy people. They dumped all of their meth-making material outside. The byproducts they dumped either outside or in the pond. You know, it was a big mess. Gloves, rubber gloves everywhere from them making the meth. They shot meth. So there were needles everywhere, outside and inside. Blood splatter on the wall from mistakes made with putting the needles in. There was poop on the walls from, for whatever reason. So Nicole is driving up to this house at night, doesn't have any idea where she is. She would get out of the car, and the only thing that she would be able to hear is the chirping sound of bugs and the croaking of frogs. It is unbearably, deafeningly loud out there. Those little creatures make so much noise, you can't hear anything else. So she would have got out of the car. She doesn't have any idea where she is. She goes into this house filled with drug addicts and poop on the walls and blood on the walls and needles everywhere. And she's not a drug addict. She's not used to this situation. It must have really terrified her. In addition, people we know were burning fires, bonfires all over the property. We know for certain that animals were being tortured out there. We know that a dog and a goat were both shot in the head. We know that a goat had its head bashed in. We know that the numerous cats that were living out there, upwards of 10 cats, were gruesome, just gruesome, horrible torture of these animals, and then they would kill them. And this is the situation that Nicole was in. She was surrounded by drug addicts, probably crazed, out of their mind, starting fires, blood everywhere, wiping shit all over the walls. Probably not even TV. She, probably didn't have access to a phone, probably didn't have access to the internet. There is no cell phone service out there whatsoever. It was hot. Even in the daytime, when you walk outside from the house sits pretty much in the middle of the property. Behind the property is a huge, long field. But on one side of the field is trees, steep hill. And that goes back off into the 19 acres that this property engulfs. On the other side, which goes up to the road, is also a very steep hill with the poison ivy, with the vines this big of poison ivy, poison oak, brambles. You can literally get completely stuck and wound up in. And at the top of that hill is Chris and Essie's house. And they would go up there to work on stuff. And Chris's mother, Patty Breach, she lives up there. And she is so nosy. She watches everything. And Nicole is thinking, even if I get out to the end of the driveway, I have no idea which direction I'm supposed to go. What if these people that live in these houses along this road, what if they're Chris and Essie's friends? What am I going to do? She was probably more terrified of escaping than staying there. So you have the drug addicts. You have the animal torture. You have Chris hitting on her. She's probably getting desperate at this point. And I'm guessing that Chris used that desperation to get her out to where he killed her. And Essie was supposed to be gone. And that didn't work out. And I know the gruesome details of this murder. And I know what happened. I know how. I know why. But I can't tell you why. Or how. Or where, really. But the most terrifying thing to me is that she probably did what she did because she thought that it would help her to escape. She probably thought that would give her that little bit of hope. It gave her that hope. Maybe she could escape. Maybe she could get out if she could just do this. And then it all went horribly wrong. And let me tell you what, when you're out there, like I said, you can't hear anything. You don't hear planes overhead. You don't hear cars. You don't hear your neighbor's dogs barking. You don't hear them closing their car doors. You don't hear their loud music. You hear nothing. You are in the middle of nowhere. If she screamed, nobody heard her. There's no way anybody would have heard her scream. There's no way if they were yelling, doing anything, there's no way anyone would have heard anything that they were doing. And there is no way to see that house or the yard or the barn or the field from the road. No way. So no one would have seen her. No one. If she screamed, no one would have come to help her. No one. And these were the last moments of her life. She lived in mortal fear for days, wondering how she was going to get in touch with her grandmother. At some point, we know, she was raped by someone in a different location. She was taken to a different location and they raped her. And she was brought back to the house. These roads out there are confusing. Even if they took her somewhere, she would never have been able to figure out where she was. She had no access to the outside world at all. She lived this way for several days, and then they killed her over nothing at all. And like I said, no one would have heard her scream or yell or beg for mercy. No one, except those people that killed her. We know who killed her. Chris and Essie Breach killed her. They've admitted to killing her. And these two monsters need to be prosecuted. They need to be judged. Because what they did was awful. I want someone to care about Nicole. I want someone to stand up and say that they'll help her. And I especially want her children to know that there were people out there that said, you know what, Nicole Aloe, she isn't trash. She was a good person. She was not perfect. She was not the best person on the planet. But you know what? She deserves more. Those little babies deserve to know that their mother was worth something and that somebody cared about her. And those last days of horror that she had to live through. And all I can think was when they cut her up, I hope to God she was dead, because the horrible things that they did to her, no one should ever have to endure those kinds of things. I want to know that someone out there cares that these horrible things happened to her. And I want to know that someone out there cares enough to do something about it and to help her family and to help her and her kids. Thanks.